So I just want to introduce you folks. You know, there's a little bit of the backstory with Elly, but Elly Sutherland, she's visiting our country from England right now, and she'll tell you a little bit about her life so you know how she ended up in Kentucky and then ended up going back to England. But as you can see, James is on the left, Rachel's on the right. She's going to tell you a little bit about her kids and how she lost them. So go ahead, yeah.
Okay, good morning. My name's Elly. I grew up in Yorkshire, in the north of England, so I say I'm always just a simple Yorkshire lass, you know. I'm married at 22 years old, and my husband was a priest in the Anglican Church who had been here and served in a church in Atlanta, Georgia as a student, so we ended up coming back here to live because they offered him a placing. So I came to America, to Atlanta, when I was 23, almost 24 years old. Probably same age, younger or a bit older than some of you here. And it was a wonderful adventure. So we lived in Atlanta for 4 years, and during that time my daughter Rachel was born at Northside Hospital in 1985. 4 years later we moved to Russellville, Arkansas, which is a much smaller town than Atlanta. And there my son was born in 1988, James. In 1996, that photo was taken right as we moved to Kentucky. So that's how old they were when we came here. So they largely grew up in Kentucky, and we lived in Winchester. And in 2003, my husband decided he might like to be with somebody else, so off he trotted. So I like to joke that he ran off with the woman in the fourth pew from the front, because that's about right. Anyway, so I was very devastated, actually, after 22 years of marriage, and felt, although I had lots of wonderful friends, I felt quite alone because my family was all in England. The worst part was that 7 months later, in March of 2004, Rachel was killed in a car accident. She was at a school called Manhattanville College in White Plains, New York. She was very smart, very articulate, and she was studying international law, international politics, and Spanish because she wanted to help people. She was her obituary for 18 years of life is incredible because she did so much to help others in her short lifetime. So they were going on spring break in a car from White Plains, New York, taking turns driving to the Keys, and the girl, Rachel's friend that was driving, lost control of the vehicle, and there was 5 of them, and Rachel was the only one that died. So James, my son, felt like he'd lost his father and his sister within a very short period of time. And so he began numbing his pain, and others around him began giving him things to numb that pain. And in the process, he became addicted to drugs and alcohol. He was 15. And sadly, he fought the battle royal for the next 10 years. That picture was taken a year before he died, and a lot of people will say, well, he doesn't look like a drug addict. And I always say to them, well, what does a drug addict look like? Because they're not all slumped in a doorway. They're people from all walks of life. It knows no boundaries at all. So James was sober on and off over those 10 years. He too was a great one to help other human beings in a worse place than him, and he went off to the Philippines for 9 months and worked in a program there. I think those were probably some of his happiest months in the latter part of his life. So in 2013, my mother in England was beginning to fail in health. So along with a conversation with James, I decided to go home for a while to help her. So I left in 2013, and then in 2014, I got a call that James had been found dead in his apartment, and he'd overdosed on heroin-laced fentanyl-laced heroin, which, as you probably know, is a big problem right now. So my first thought was, how does it happen twice? You know, it's still a question I really can't answer. So that's the story. I stayed in England and looked after my mother, and she died this past January. Except that my mum was 84, and although I miss her terribly, that was the right way round. So my mum had a good life and a long life, you know, so her passing was not unexpected, as in the children. So I still live in England. All my family are around me. I work in healthcare. I came to BCTC to become a medical assistant, and I was here when Rachel died. And the staff at the college and the fellow students were fantastic in helping me move along. And I graduated with honours at the end of that 3 semesters, because I felt like my daughter Rachel, she was really proud of me for going back to school. So she would call from New York, and I would, in fact, she had to teach me some algebra to pass the test to get in the college. I was never very good at math, and it was years since I'd done any, so she taught me enough algebra to get through that college entrance exam. So I thought to myself, if I don't complete this, when I get to those pearly gates, she's going to go, "Mom!" So I did it thinking of her and knowing she would be pushing me along. And the other part was I didn't have a whole lot of choice, because I needed to earn money and support myself and James at that point. So I'm in England now. I work in healthcare there. I'm a member of what they call the Falls team. So when elderly people fall, we go out and see what we can do to help them in their home with grab rails and equipment and such like. So that's what I do there. Is that good?
Yeah, it's wonderful. How about if we go ahead and we'll open it up to some of the questions that people had the other day, and then if any of you have questions, please ask whatever comes to your mind. She's an open book. She's more than willing to answer anything for you.
Yeah.
You know, so, okay, let's go, how about Chris? You want to start with some of yours, if you don't mind?
Yeah. When you meet people and they ask, do you have children, what do you say? And do you welcome the opportunity to speak about them?
That's evolved over the years. It's 16 years almost since Rachel died, and 6 almost since James died, because they died 10 years apart almost to the day. So I struggled with it for a lot of years, you know, and sometimes would just say, yes, I have 2. But you can rarely leave it there, because you can guarantee somebody's going to say, well, where do they live, or are they in school, or do they have a family? So because so many years have gone by, I've learned now to be comfortable just being truthful. So I say, yes, I have 2, but sadly they've both died, which is shocking for people quite often. I realise that, and I find myself apologising for saying it, which is a bit ridiculous, but you know, you know that it's such a horrible thing that I feel for them, you know, receiving the information. So I'll say, I know it's shocking, and I appreciate if you can't respond, but most times people are quite good. So yes, I do now, because they'll always be a part of me. I'm not going to not have had those children ever. You know, they're always part of me. They are my children, they're just not here. And I do like to talk about them, yeah, very much so. But I also like my quiet. I always say, in order to deal with this, I have to limit the time I think about it. So I can't, they're always there, but I can't think about everything that happened and constantly, because it's overwhelming. So I have to limit the time, and it's something you learn to do in time. Is that good? Does that answer your question, Chris?
Yes, ma'am.
Frank is right here. I have him come up so it'll be a little
Hello.
easier. He's got a few questions for you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for like family holidays and birthdays, how do you go around to celebrating those?
Well, their birthdays, I usually am fairly low key. You know, if I'm off work or if any of my family are off work, we'll generally take a trip to the sea, you know, and have a walk. And then generally I'll give a donation to something in their honour. I can't buy them birthday presents now, so I'll donate to Shepherd House, which is where James was for a while, or another cause that would have Rachel would have liked when it's her birthday. And then at night time I always light a candle in front of their picture to remember them. Christmas is not my friend anymore. I really do not enjoy the holidays now. But I still try. So, one thing that's difficult is it starts so early. We've had Christmas stuff in England out since August. So, you know, that part I don't like. But, again, as the time's gone on, I've learnt to shut it out. So I've just done a mindfulness course, and one thing they teach you is to acknowledge something's there and then go on. So I have applied that to all this Christmas junk that's lying in the shelves. I just acknowledge it's there and go on. I celebrate it with my family, my sister. It's usually quiet. If I can work, I will. I'm not working this year, but I have done in the past. And through that working, because I work with the elderly, I quite often find a couple of people who are very lonely too. So I chat with them, and that makes the day better. And I've thought about going and helping at homeless places, you know, I might do that this year. So I just struggle through it. The thing you have to know is that it will be a struggle on and off. If you accept that, if you don't sort of fight it, if you know this is going to be sad, you know. Now, that wasn't how it always was, you know. I went through them kicking and screaming in the early days, really. But it's time. Time teaches you how to continue. And my favourite words are, because I always say, I hear them saying, keep going, Mama, you've got this. And see, that picture of them pulling their faces there, I can absolutely see them saying, keep going, Mama, you got this. So that's how I do that. Okay?
My next question would be, after Rachel's death, and especially after James' death, did you question your religion intensely, or did that help you pull through the process?
I would say largely it helped me pull through the process, but that doesn't mean I didn't have moments of anger and question of God, and I did ask. But what you find is there's a big silence. There's not an answer to that question. So you've got one of two choices. You either persevere with your faith or you go on without it, and I, for me personally, have found that persevering with my faith has been the most beneficial thing of all, really. I don't attend church regularly, but I read my devotionals every day and look for comfort and solace in those. And I'd say possibly I'm more spiritual now, so my church can be sitting by the sea or in the countryside or anywhere. It can be anywhere. It doesn't have to be a building. You know, but yeah, overwhelmingly it's been a source of strength for me.
And I I know you do photography and you write now. How did you start doing that? How did you get involved?
Well, I was sitting in my living room. This was after James died. I really didn't write after Rachel. I was sitting in the living room looking outside at the flowers and the trees and the sky, and I just wrote a couple of sentences about that. And that's how it started, quite literally. And I put, this is a Sunday scribble. And I built on that to where I started doing them weekly, and where people were saying, we really love reading your Sunday scribbles, keep doing them, you know, and that's how it evolved. And one thing about writing is extremely therapeutic, you know, whatever you're going through in life, whether you publish it, whether you share it or you don't, to write down what's bothering you, spill it out onto the paper is very helpful, or it has been to me. So then also, I started, when something like this happens and it's so catastrophic, you can so easily lose your feelings, your faith in everything. So I started, I've always noticed it, but more intentionally noticing the sky, the clouds. I walk out to my car to go to work in the morning, and I don't see the cars and look down and think I've got to go to work. I look at the sunset, I look and see what's blooming in the garden today. I've been forced into that because the other things I might have been thinking about have all gone. So I say it's forced me to look around and see that the world's still a beautiful place, and anybody can do this, no matter what's bothering you. It is. You just have to look, make yourself open. So I started using my iPhone, you know, to take pictures and write something about them, and that went on to the photography. And that makes me go out and look for beautiful.
And my final question would be, what would you say to a parent that recently lost their child?
Okay, it's in the first initial stages, there's a numbness that just envelops you. So you can't think, you can't hear, you can't process what's going on around you at all. It's similar in any grief, really, but it seems like it's 10 times that in when your child dies. So what I say is, be patient with yourself. Be patient with yourself. Allow yourself to go through all the different stages, and they're not linear. There's this Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the 5 stages of grief, and they're all there, but they don't go anger, boom, boom, boom. You might be in one week, and another the next, and you might flip to another one, and back to the next. So what you have to do is have a lot of patience for yourself, a lot of care with yourself, protect yourself, until you start to feel again a little bit. And then you can move on a little bit more. And you might feel a bit and move on a bit more, and then you might fall back again. And it takes a long, long time. Somewhere along the way, I say, it changed. I can't, and other grieving parents have said the same, I can't tell you when, how, where. Somewhere along the way I learned, or I had learned, how to live beside it.
Thank you.
Tabitha, you want to ask real quick if you want to, she's right here. If you want to stand up, just come a little closer so they can get your question, please.
I don't know if you can really answer this part of it, but how did you learn that stuff? Did you have a good support group, or was it more just on your own figuring it out?
First of all, I'm very lucky. I've got a very, very supportive family and wonderfully supported friends on both sides of the Atlantic. So that is a great blessing. I joined Compassionate Friends, which is a grief support group for parents who've lost children. So that way you get to talk with other grieving parents. And that group is really good because the world expects you to sort of move on a bit quicker than you're going to, largely. you know. But compassionate friends understand. The parents in there understand. So if after 4 years after you've lost your child you have a major meltdown, they get that, you know. Whereas somebody else might say, oh my goodness, it was 4 years ago, you know, you're surely feeling better now. Well, no, I'm not. I will never ever feel completely better. That's just not going to happen, you know. Not in the sense that it'll never bother me again. Of course it will. They were my children. I gave birth to those two human beings, and it's a huge loss. So, no, it'll never go. So I had compassionate friends. I read a lot. Not just people who've lost children, but other books. For instance, I read Elizabeth Edwards' book. She had breast cancer, she did lose a child, and she died, you know, eventually. And her husband cheated on her, and, you know. So I read her book, and other people's stories of strength and perseverance were a great source of help. So you have to be resourceful for sure, because at the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much, it does matter, but no matter how much family you've got around you or how many friends, you have to do the work. You're the only one that can get this right in your head or deal with it. So, okay, does that answer your question okay?
Two different questions for you. The first one kind of goes off of what you were saying with the support group, but how do you cope with being alone even though you do have a good support group?
I've really learned to like my own company quite well, and probably wouldn't make a good partner anymore because I like to do things my own way, and you know, I'm quite happy doing what I do. It's an ongoing thing, coping with it. My sister has 2 children. They're grown now, they're in their 20s. But I love them dearly. They're my niece and nephew, and I take a lot of interest in them. But when other people, all my friends, everybody talk about their children, it's a lonely place to be. And there's no way around that. It's forever changed, you know, and it'll always be that way. But again, I sort of say to myself, you've got 2 choices here. You can run away from it and totally alienate yourself, or you can be interested, because it's not their fault. It's not mine either. So that's what I do. I do stay interested in their lives. I don't think I really ever feel lonely, to be honest. Between my faith, my friends, my family, my work, I'm okay. Yeah.
And also, we were told that you were writing a book, so how has it been writing your book? And when you're writing, do you ever feel sad about the old memories?
I do, yeah. It's a compilation of all those scribbles that I've done, the Sunday scribbles over the years. So I'm just putting them all together and sorting them out. But in writing the preface, you know, the story of how we got to that, I found I could only do so much of it at a time because it was hard, you know. Another thing that happens as the years go on, you start to think less about how they died and more about who they were. It turns around. Initially, I mean, when Rachel died, I would wake up in the night bolt upright because I would imagine her flying out of that car and hitting the ground. And then with James, oh, that's really majorly complicated with the drug overdose. Lots of questions. Should I have been there? Realistically, I know if I'd been in Lexington, he would have just died round the corner from me instead of me being over there. But as a mother, I question that, you know. So going through all of that is it is difficult. But like I say, as the years have gone by, it's an amazing healing thing. Is that I rarely think about Rachel's accident. I think about Rachel and the good things, the good times. Yeah. Is that okay?
Do you mind? Does anybody have any other questions before Christian comes up with his while we're going along here? Anybody?
Here, Pete.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I know, like, a lot of times people, in an attempt to feel for you, will ask you a lot of, like, how are you doing, like, at the funeral or stuff like that. So, I guess, how do you navigate your way through that? And then, what are your, like, responses? And what's, like, the most annoying question you've been asked about?
That's a good question. They're often not questions, they're more statements to try and attempt to make you feel better. And I will say that I'm never angry at anybody for their statement or question, because it's generally just an attempt to try and make you feel better. It's not done with an intent to harm you. But saying things to people like, God must have needed them for something else, or they're in a better place now, things like that are not helpful, And after Rachel died, do you have other children? Yes, I've got James. Oh, well, that's good. At least you've got another. Well, that's like saying to somebody who's lost an arm, well, don't worry about it. You've got the other one, I mean, it's never going to be the same for them again, is it? They will never do what they could with two arms. So it's the same with your children, So there are a lot of things, but most important thing to know, I think, is that I don't ever get angry at people for saying those things, because if you haven't experienced something in life, you don't know. If you haven't been through it, if I haven't had breast cancer, I don't know what a woman with breast cancer goes through. I haven't had chemotherapy, I don't know how that feels. So, I might totally say the wrong thing in my attempt to, So as long as you don't feel like somebody's being, And another one that really bothers me is when people have near misses in cars or are cured from an illness and they credit God. And I think, well, where does that leave me? A man. For me, that's an arrogant perspective, because what you're saying is I'm more special than everybody else around here, so I was chosen, I don't personally believe that he makes choices like that. I think that he's there to help us through any eventuality, because in this world and all the things that happen, how can you believe any differently, So I don't ever get upset with them. That's the most important thing. I might say to my sister, I can't believe she said that to me. But I usually give people the benefit of the doubt. In terms of the funeral, you don't really hear people. You just go through it in some sort of vacuum. I think that that's God's protection myself, because I think if you could actually feel and hear, you would not make it through. So you seem to be surrounded by this. So I do remember people coming, I remember all the hugs, I remember the love. I probably couldn't tell you one thing that was said to me. But that's protection. Does that help?
Yes, ma'am.
We got Christian over here. He's going to ask a couple of questions. Thanks, Christian.
So obviously something like this being as traumatic as it is, how long did it go back or take to go back to, kind of a normal routine, or if you've ever been able to go back to a normal routine?
Well, the short answer is no. Nothing's ever normal again in terms of family. It takes at least a couple of years to start to feel a little bit again. Yeah, at least. But that's very dependent on the person. A grief journey is very personal to anyone. One person will do it completely different to another. And there's no right or wrong way. It's however that person needs to get through it. I was at school at BCTC when Rachel died, and I ploughed myself into my studies, so that helped. And after James died, I had to go back to work, sort of didn't like that I had to go back to work, but in the end it was probably the best thing, because it was a little bit of distraction in amongst everything else you have to sort out. So again, the big thing is acceptance of what is. So I accept that life will never be normal for me again, but that doesn't mean there won't be any life. It's just different.
And then another question is, I know a lot of people say, you know, no parent should ever have to bury their dead or bury their children, but does it almost bring kind of a sense of relief that your children will never have to experience the pain of burying you?
Yeah. You know, I've never, well, I saw that question on the paper. I've never thought about it a whole lot. I have been known to say that, actually. You know, well, they won't have to go through the pain of losing me. And I've just lost my mother in January of this year. Yeah, I mean, I do think to myself, they won't have to, there'll be nobody to look after me. I tell my sister, she's 5 years younger than me, so I tell her, you're going to have to look after me. So, but no, I don't really think about that too much, to be honest. But it is something, they're spared everything in life now, aren't they? They're forever young. There's nothing else they'll have to go through. They won't have to go through any more hurt or disappointment or failure or success, nothing. It's they're a part of this journey is over.
Is there anything I forget? Do you have another one, Kristen?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Alright, so this one's kind of a two-parter. You know, has there ever been any doubt that you may not see your children when you get to heaven? I know you kind of talked about, you know, seeing your daughter at the gates and whatnot, but is there any doubt that they may not have believed? And, you know, if so, how does that make you feel?
Well, I talked to Peter a bit about this last night. I completely believe that I will be reunited with my children again in some form or another. Our souls and the energy that was our lives will be together again. I'm a Christian, so I do believe in the resurrection. But it's more a case of what helps you in your life, because we just don't know, do we, really? Not 100%. I mean, it's called faith. That's what faith is. So my faith is that we will be together. But that faith helps me to live in this life without them. So if after I die there's nothing there, I won't know. They won't know. I happen to believe there will be, but I don't know what it is. I do get comfort very much comfort in, I say knowing I'll be with them again, because I feel like I do know that.
Tabitha over there, do you want to just stand up so they can make sure?
I know you said sometimes, like when you were like first started going through all this, like you were kind of angry with your religion, and how did you not lose faith in your religion after you lost both kids? How did you continue to believe after that happened to you?
Because there are so many things that happen along the way that are not, I just can't believe they're just, what's the word? I just can't believe they're just random. I believe they were meant. Things happen. I meet people. It just all the time shows me that there is still something. There is something to believe in. And I can't count the many times, even patients that I've met. And I walk in and they'll start talking to me about a child they lost in the 1940s, you know, and we share about that. And or even lately, I had a lady in her 90s, because I toy with the idea, do I stay in England or should I come back? I'm an American citizen, so I can come back if I want. And I met this little old lady, 90-something years old, and she has a sister. She's German, this lady. she came in 1946, married to an Englishman. I said, oh, just after the war. And she said, yes. They told us not to fraternise, but we did. So she married an English soldier and came to live in England. And now he's dead, she's elderly, and her sister lives in Germany. They're very close, but they can only talk on the phone now. They can't get to each other. They'll never see each other again, they know that. They'll never get to hug. So I thought about my sister. And to me, I don't just see that as, I was meant to meet that lady. I was meant to meet that lady to help me in my decision, because I can't stand the thought of never seeing my sister again. You know, I can't stand the thought of being sitting in a old people's facility in Lexington, Kentucky, only being able to speak on the phone to my sister because she's in England and we can't get to each other, because that does happen eventually, you know. So it's a big factor. So lots of things like that make me believe, because I call them God things. I totally believe they are. So those things help me. And you have to leave yourself open to that. You know. I've never not believed in God. I've just said to him, what have I done? You know, I never asked that. And then I realised I haven't. You know, I haven't done anything. It's just life. Hopefully it won't. It's quite rare to lose both your children or all your children. I have met other parents that have. I've met parents that have lost 3 and 4 children. So it's rare. It happens. But all of us experience grief at some point. Be it a sibling, a parent, grandparent that you're close to, best friend. I mean, my children's friends were devastated, you know, when they died, and still talk about them to this day.
So, you know, do you and your ex-husband ever communicate now just about your children, or like get together on birthdays?
No. That's his choice. He doesn't want to be in touch with me, so I just sort of let that go.
Diana had something.
Yeah, I have 2 different questions. So the first one would be, are you like in any support group, or do you go, because I can tell that you get comfort from like talking to other people that have been in the same situation as you. So do you go to like support groups so you all can kind of like talk about it?
Yeah, I go to the Compassionate Friends. In England, there are not, in Lexington there was a group that met, and there's one in Winchester, Richmond, Mount Sterling, but there are very few and far between in the north of England. A lot of it is in the south. So, but I did find a group, and through that I became very good friends with the lady that runs it, so we're like best friends now, and we just meet individually to chat and have lunch, you know. But I do go to the group. I also help at the Childless, I hate that name, but the Childless Parents Weekend they have, which is a weekend in a facility where people who've lost all their children gather. The Compassionate Friends has been around since the 1950s, and it was started by an Anglican minister in England who had families in 2 different churches that had lost children, and what he did was he thought, well, they probably need to speak to each other, and so he got them together and they formed a group, and now it's worldwide. So I do go to that, and actually now I help at the Childless Parents one, so I'll lead groups and talk and share. I took a year out because I lost my mother in January, and I felt like I needed a year to. I was also doing the newsletter for them, so I felt like I needed a year just to. I'm very aware of what I need to do. I know now when I need to step back and just be quiet for a while, because you can get compassion fatigue. That's what they call it, where you're giving too much of yourself to everybody else, and if you don't leave some time to deal with what you've got, it can go badly wrong. So it's all in the knowing.
We talked a lot about that with member caregivers and all that, how they get
That's
that
right.
compassion
Yeah.
fatigue, and
Yeah.
when you just know you have to step back from it.
Well, I cared for my mother, so
Yeah.
I knew well, after she died that I had huge compassion fatigue, so I needed to take this year and just rest and work on my book and do what I wanted.
Kind of like, just when I know you talked about the support groups and religion and stuff, at this point in your life, like what brings you the most comfort? Like, I know you're never like gonna like be completely comfortable with what happened, but what
Right.
makes you like the most like able to kind of keep going?
That I have something to give out of this experience. So doing things like this today, or writing my book, or writing for compassionate friends, or sometimes I get a message on Facebook from somebody that says, hey, I've got a friend that's just lost a child, or would you mind becoming their friend so they can, you know, and I say, yeah, sure, you know. So just helping others and making something positive come out of an extremely...
Do you have to be careful about that? Like when people ask you to like talk to somebody, like have you gotten negative responses from you kind of trying to help somebody?
No,
Like-
not really, because I'm quite careful. You know, I never tell people how to handle it.
Yeah.
I just share with them something of mine, my experience maybe. But I'm always careful to say, your journey's your journey. You know, we don't need to tell other people how to think and feel, and you know, we just need to hold their hand while they do it.
So on your trip to the States, when you come back to the States, is that one of those times that is a happy time, a dreadful time, or one of those acknowledgement times that you just acknowledge that's where you're going and you just move on?
It's a bit of all of that, really. The first times I came back after James died were harder, yeah. But that's, again, in time, I've found how to deal with that. Their ashes are both buried up in Irving at the Cathedral Domain. It's the Episcopal Church camp up there, and their ashes are in the Memorial Garden, so I always go up there at least once, and it's peaceful and quiet, and all you can hear is the wind in the trees, because usually when I'm here there's no church camp, so there's no children up there. So it's lovely to sit in that silence, and it's sad, and I don't want to leave, no. But again, I know they're saying to me, go on, Mum.
I have a two-part question. Is there anywhere that you like absolutely can't go, that you just refuse to go see, or something that's like kind of triggering to you? And then do you stay in contact with their friends?
Right. There's one place I haven't gone back to yet, and it's a place called Burton Agnes Hall in England. And the weekend that I'd lost contact with James and I was desperately trying to find him, I knew my daughter was dead before they actually told me. I just felt this huge disconnect inside. So there was a snowdrop festival at Burton Agnes Hall, and Mum and I went there to see the snowdrops, but the whole time I was walking around, I had this horrible, horrible feeling inside of me. I haven't been back there. I haven't found the strength to go back there yet. I probably will someday, but maybe I won't. Doesn't matter. You know, I don't have to. But I don't like driving up Tates Creek Road past the apartments, so I avoid that, where James was found. Rachel died in Georgia on Interstate 95, so I've never any reason to be around there, but I don't particularly want to be either. So, in terms of their friends, I love to stay in touch with their friends, and I do that. Facebook has allowed us to be in touch with people, of course. I know the social media so much easier, but it's been an actual blessing for me, because I've stayed in touch with them. I love it when they have babies, they have their children, I'll go buy something, go do a little bit of baby shopping, because I'll never have grandchildren, so I think to myself, well, I'll do it for their friends. It's not quite the same, but like we just said earlier, nothing's quite the same. Nothing ever will be quite the same, and I can wish for it to be as much as I want. It ain't gonna happen. So the choice is, you either put your big girl pants on and find a way around it, or you don't.
Did you ever have a hard time blaming like the driver,
No.
or did you never think about that at all? Like
No.
her fault?
There was no. It was an accident. There was absolutely nothing involved in it that you could, there was no drugs, no alcohol involved in that. She just simply lost control. There were 5 youngsters driving to Florida, sharing the driving, thought they had it all under control. Accidents happen. Sadly we live in a world that wants blame for everything, that wants to say somebody has to pay for this, and it's not a very good place to be, really, because at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, it doesn't change the outcome. If I blamed her, and that poor girl, she's got to live with it the rest of her life, and I know that she had a hard time. I'm still in touch with her. Yeah. And James, I sort of know who sold him the drugs, but he died this year. Overdose. And that's sad to me.
What I want to do, just for the time, I know you guys still have other questions, and I appreciate it. I know she does. But I got to plug what she's doing here, because hopefully one day, or not hopefully, when it does come out, you'll want to read her book. She's going to read, just to give you an example of what you can expect in her book. And I don't know if you folks remember, I shared it with you, those of you that were here. Do you remember last fall the woman, or the whale, that her calf had died and she carried the calf around? Just like Elly had said, she'll look at the trees and the flowers, and she sees the beauty. That's what gives her a lot of, what's the word I want to say for your writing? Not ideas, but just the motivation behind it.
Yeah.
And I remember reading that, and I was teaching this class, and I read it to the class, and I looked up, and they were all just like, what? And we did end up getting to Skype with her from England last fall. But she's going to read it to you, and it's just an idea of what is contained in her book. It's not this step-by-step, which I know you've gotten that from her by now, of this is what you need to do, or this is what you should do. She's just sharing her journey of grief and loss, extreme loss, and she's put it into words. So she's going to share that with you. And then in the end, if you have any questions, a few, because we'll have to finish up. But she's going to read this one to you. This is one of her Sunday scribbles.
That's right. So generally I'll either read something, see something, hear something, or happen on something that'll start me thinking in my head, and I find a way that relates to the life I'm living and the journey I'm on. So this particular Sunday I've just read this story. I've been following this story about the orca whale carrying her dead calf in a grieving ritual. The other whales in her pod have been helping her along, but she is falling behind them at last report as they go on their journey. There is such a spiritual parallel between these gentle creatures and our human grief, especially when it involves the death of our child. I would have physically carried my children with me if it were possible. I told the funeral director when Rachel died that I wanted to keep her at the funeral home so that I could sit by her any time and for as long as I wanted. Sadly, I was unable to see James due to the circumstances, and that is a decision I will always ponder. I do carry them metaphorically, pushing them along with me, and like the whale mama, I have to periodically let go of them to tend to the business of life, always picking them up again to continue my journey. I will never let go. The whale mama has lots of support to carry her dead calf, as the other pod members surround her in a ritualistic dance. However, it is reported, as I said, that she's falling behind as they push ahead for their own survival. And there you have it. As time passes, I've found myself falling behind the pod, as it were. It's not that the love and support isn't still there, but more a case of people going on with their lives. This is not some kind of malicious neglect. It's perfectly normal. I fall behind because there are no engagements, graduations, weddings, grandchildren, recovery celebrations, birthdays and such. So I swim at the back of my pod, carrying my lifeless, beautiful children as I try to stay engaged with the rest of the world. It is true to say I do have company back there with other friends who are swimming beside me, carrying their children. We nudge each other along constantly and have a ritualistic dance of our own, quite separate from the normal expected life dance. Sometimes I cry out with the pain from the weight I carry, not wanting to let go for 1 second. It is overwhelmingly tiring, and treading water is all I can manage. Quite often, someone in my pod drops back, giving me a huge push to help me along. They do this by acknowledging my memories, speaking the names of my children, or sharing stories and photographs. The whale mama has quite different priorities in her life, yet we are one and the same. There is always someone in your pod who needs help to keep swimming for many reasons. Don't let them fall behind. Do that ritualistic dance around them and make sure they are not lost to the deep, dark, lonely waters with no help in sight. Reach out your hand and hold theirs for a while to keep them swimming, or even a fin if that applies. That'll be in my book. And it's just one way I see. I read the story of the whale mama and how much her life and mine paralleled. And as long as you keep looking for that, Before I came to this class today, I mean, since my mother died, I have struggled a bit on and off because I've had another huge life change. You know, no, my mum, I had her for 60 years, so. And I can already see that even coming and interacting with you all and sharing my journey has lifted me up. It just does. It lifts you up. You just have to keep engaging, even when it's hard.